Well, first, let me congratulate all those who've been elected to the governing board, and I look forward to working with them over the coming 3 years. Colleagues, starting a new organisation is always hard. Starting a new organisation on the shoulders of two previous organisations with their own long histories provides further challenges. Ensuring rapid progress on expectations of our members to truly reach the mission of being the global voice for science, while at the same time building this new organisation, was compounded by the arrival of COVID. We've had to work in very different ways over the last 20 months, a mode that creates both challenges and opportunities. It's now 3:30 in the morning in New Zealand, and perhaps that simple observation says a lot about the challenges of managing a global organisation through the pandemic. Yet our progress has been remarkable. Those who took the initial steps that led to the merger 3 years ago between the two legacy organisations should be thanked by the entire scientific community for their insights and their efforts. They created the strapline, the Global Voice for Science, which underpins our mission statement. How we operationalise that even further will determine how we set our priorities and continue our evolution over the next 3 years. Over the first 3 years, an enormous amount has been achieved by the headquarters team, the board under the insightful leadership of Dia Reddy, its committees, its working groups, regional officers, and the many members and individuals who have contributed to what has been a remarkable but still incomplete transition. An overwhelming vote of thanks must be given to Haida and the headquarters team. What may not be so obvious to those not involved has been how complex and time-consuming has been merging two organisations against legacy backgrounds and the context of legal complexity. But at the same time, we have accelerated the efforts towards our mission of becoming an effective and truly representative global voice for science. The activity and achievement report presented on the first day and the action plan, both in its initial form and now in its second edition, as you approved 2 days ago, shows much of what we've been doing. But beyond that, there's an enormous hidden amount of representation and relationship building. The board has helped steer the changes that were expected and indeed were needed. On behalf of all of us, I thank Dia for his leadership, his wisdom, careful team building and chairmanship. And we've had a board, committee and steering groups that have made enormous contributions on issues ranging from changes in internal management to our relationship to international bodies. Oman was to host this General Assembly until COVID struck. But the governing board had already seen the value of a midterm policy-focused meeting, and in discussion with the Omani government and the Royal Court of Oman, we've agreed to host an inaugural meeting with global policy leaders to discuss the science policy interface on January the 30th to February 3rd, 2023. We see this as the start of a regular 3-yearly midterm meeting for the Council, and hopefully by then we can regularly meet face to face. The global voice for science are the 4 key words in our mission statement. If it's to be a valid claim, we must address the issues of membership. The membership is built on a heritage of national academies and international disciplinary bodies and social science associations. But the global landscape of science is now so much broader. There are disciplines that are not well represented, and indeed the bulk of this world scientific community, perhaps 10 million people, are not members of our member organisations. And as we discussed on Monday, this is an area of high priority to consider and discuss. Further, even when individuals are members of our member organisations, I've been surprised how little our work and our activities are familiar to the scientific community. We need collectively to find a way to be more and fully inclusive, for it's only through that inclusivity that we can become a strong voice that will be heard. If you wish the ISC to be successful in its mission, then we must have your commitment to be much more proactive in reaching through to your members and beyond on our activities, so all the scientific community understands what the ISC is trying to do on their behalf. This lack of awareness is currently our biggest weakness. I come to the ISC as a medical scientist whose recent years have been largely spent in a career at the interface between science and policy and science and diplomacy. What that experience has told me is that a voice is meaningless unless there's a person or an institution that wants to hear it. And that's sadly not always the case. We need to build our listeners. This means if we want to be a global voice, we must put our effort into our relationships with the multilateral system, the UN agencies, OECD, World Economic Forum, and so forth. In that regard, I want to thank Julia Martin-Lefebvre and a working group for a challenging but outstanding report on what the ISC needs to do to be more effective in the multilateral system, which will be presented tomorrow. To progress that agenda will require resources and attention that the current profile and funding does not provide. Some rebalancing may be needed in our priorities while we look for ways to expand our reach and capacities through the donor community. This itself needs effort. But our membership is another resource, and we must reach out to you, not just to involve you in initiatives or to disseminate our activities, but to also engage you in the critical task of building relationships. Never has it been so urgent and so critical that the voice for science speaks and that it is heard. The positioning of science has been affected in many societies over the last few years. It's been politicized in some places, and we've seen a massive increase in activist disinformation, and multilateralism has also been fractured. Yet it was the global effort by science, both public and private, that brought us the COVID vaccines at an unprecedented rate. Unfortunately, the multilateral system has not fully seized the opportunity such cooperation has created, and sadly, vaccine coverage remains poor and unequal with tragic consequences. Our COVID scenarios project that I reported yesterday is intended to provide policymakers with a toolkit to hopefully make better choices over the years ahead as the pandemic rolls on. The long-term social, economic, societal, and strategic implications cannot be ignored. It leaves permanent fingerprints on the way the science system operates. It leaves critical lessons for how science must input into policy, how science diplomacy must evolve, and how we must address future existential risks. We all understand that science must be a truly global and inclusive endeavour to address these challenges of the global commons: pandemics, climate change, social inclusion and equity, food and water and energy security, urbanisation, human development, geostrategic fractionation, rapid technological change, and much more. And at the same time, each country has to put these and other challenges into local and specific context. And central to this is strengthening the relationships between science and policy making, embedding science more deeply into society, promoting progressive change in how the science system must evolve for the changing position of science and expectations in society. ISC will work with its affiliates like INSA and all our members and partners to make an even greater effort in building understandings and capacities at these interfaces. We should be proud of the start we've already made. We're already deeply embedded with the revision of human development by the United Nations Development Programme, on disaster risk reduction with UND disaster risk reduction. We've worked closely with UNESCO on the issues of open science, and the work on publishing, which we've just heard, has been well received. I'd also call attention to the position paper recently released on science as a global public good. I believe it should be distributed to all your members and more broadly. And I particularly acknowledge the leadership of Jeffrey Bolton in this regard. We've had a broad range of engagements on sustainability challenges. In this regard, I would highlight the report, Unleashing Science, Delivering Missions for Sustainability, and the related discussion we've had through the Global Research Council and the Global Forum of Funders. The next steps heralded in the final part of that report have commenced. We're in the process of establishing a commission chaired by two global statespersons, Irina Bukova, former Director General of UNESCO, and Ms. Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand and Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, and including our patron Ismail Sergeldin, distinguished scientists such as Johan Rockström, Lord Martin Rees and Albert van Jaarsveld, philanthropists, statespersons, funders and sustainability strategists. And the mission of this commission is to explore how to implement, organise and fund global science missions for sustainability. We hope to announce the full membership and get to work within a few weeks. They've been asked to report to the Global Knowledge Dialogue that the ISC will host in Amman in February 23. And just today, the ISC accepted an invitation from the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction to be a partner in the establishment of a Centre of Excellence for Climate and Disaster Resilience. The nature of science is changing. There remains much to do with respect to inclusivity and diversity. There are areas of scientific activity that merit deep reflection. For example, the emergence of transdisciplinary science is seen as critical to many so-called wicked problems. But how can transdisciplinary science be fairly evaluated, funded, and assessed? How do we exploit our increasingly pluralistic capabilities of the ISC and embrace all the robust knowledge disciplines from the natural, social, data, technological sciences, and the humanities? And as we reach out, how does science interact with other knowledge systems, including Indigenous knowledge? The need is vast, the gaps and opportunities are rather obvious, but on the current financial base and with a rather constrained membership, we cannot fully address our mission without philanthropic support. And this is the immediate challenge the Council faces. I again want to congratulate the new board who was elected today. We have a busy, important and exciting 3 years ahead of us. But I also want to thank those who put their names forward today but were not elected. You'll be at the front of the queue as we seek help on the many tasks ahead. Collectively, all of us, the newly elected board, our headquarters staff, our committees, our regional focal points, our members and associate members have a critical job to do as we work together to ensure that by giving science a global voice, we can advance the interests of all the planet's citizens while protecting the planet itself. In 3 years, we cannot do everything we might want to do, but by a truly cooperative approach, we can make a significant dent on the issues ahead of us and build on the remarkable work that Daya and the current board have done. Thank you very much.